What's up, guys? So this week we're going to be talking about the wonder of God. But before I could even get started, there's something that I wonder. Why aren't there more guys to babysit, huh? I mean, the pay is good. It's not hard work, right? I mean, you just put an Elmo on TV, right? And then give him a bottle, sit back, relax, and that does all the work for you. It's as simple as that, right? I mean, that's what I thought. And there I was in high school, 4-year-old, 2-year-old little cousins, as my aunt and my uncle walked out the door for dinner in the movie. And while they were walking out the door, they were little angels. But the minute the door closed, it was as if a transformation happened. And the 2-year-old turned into like a banshee child. I mean, I don't even know what was going on. I couldn't even get the boy to calm down. It took me hours just to get him to sit down and eat his oatmeal. You know, it's right around that point, right around then, that the 4-year-old comes up to me and he says, he wants to play. So I said, okay, what do you want to do? He said, I want to make an arts and crafts project. Now, honestly, I don't do arts and crafts. I haven't done arts and crafts in years. So I said, what do you want to do? He said, he wants to paint an egg. I said, it's not Easter time. And the only time I think about eggs this time of year is with a McMuffin with hash browns. But he was insistent. So I said, we're building this egg. And I may not know how to, but I know that Google knows how to. And so that's what I did. I went to Google and I searched. And I said, you know what? We're not going to do just your typical egg and dye method. No, we're going to do something much, much better. And the instructions said you take an egg and a silk tie. And you're to wrap the silk tie around the egg, like so. Give it a quick snip. And then wrap rope around that tie. And the object was that when this goes into the water and starts to boil, it doesn't just give you the one normal plain dye that you get if you were to do this normally. No, you would get the beautiful color and decoration of your silk tie. Voila. There we go. Silk tie, egg. In the pouch it goes. And in the water. And let it boil. Now, when that egg comes out, it will be the most beautiful egg we've ever seen in our lives. Patterned by this silk tie. Oh, I was a genius. And he stared in complete awe and wonder and complete anticipation, waiting for this egg to come out. You know, we live in an information age. And there's no doubt that the information is right at our fingertips. And dial-up takes too long. We want the information right now. 3G, 4G, give us 5G. It doesn't even matter. Because when it's 10 o'clock and you're working on that school report, you need to get to Wikipedia as fast as possible, right? And that's good. That's good because that's how technology should advance. But it does come with a price. Because reality is this: when you're so desperate for everything instantly, you start losing the opportunity to wonder, to really just admire how everything really is. To sit here like my 4-year-old little cousin and gaze at this boiling egg, waiting in wonder. You know, the ancient Israelites, they understood what that was about. Oh, they knew how to wonder. I mean, they would gaze up at the stars, and they didn't have an iPhone app that could look up there and tell them exactly what constellation they were looking at. No, they just had their wonder as they gazed at the stars and what God put up there. And they would sit around at night around the fire as it crackled. And they would talk to their little kids and they would tell them the wonderful, glorious stories of God and what he did for them. And they would talk to their children and tell them about their heroes, Moses, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Isaac. And the children, I'd imagine, would look eyes wide and know that these were their heroes, this was their history, and these would be the stories that they would tell their kids for generations to come. Because back then, God was in the business of doing some pretty miraculous things. And it starts right here. If we flash on back to the Hebrew slaves, here they are enslaved to Pharaoh of Egypt, beaten and broken so bad that they cry out to God and they say, help, we need help. And God hears their cries. And he sends Moses. And Moses goes right to Pharaoh and he says, let him go. And Pharaoh says no. And so Moses performs a miracle inspired by God. But Pharaoh's people copy that miracle. And so Moses does another miracle and another miracle. and another miracle, until Pharaoh's people look in complete astonishment and say, what kind of God is this? This God is much bigger than ours. And lastly, Moses unleashes a plague across Egypt that kills every firstborn son, including Pharaoh's. And it's at this point that Pharaoh says, stop, we can't take it anymore. Take the slaves and get out immediately. And the Hebrew slaves pack up and they walk out of Egypt rejoicing and saying, look what God did for us. Look at the wonder that he moved in. But sure enough, a couple days later, Pharaoh thinks and says, did I just get rid of all my slaves? No, we got to go get them. And he sends an army to chase them. And so the Israelites finally get to the Red Sea, and knowing that the Egyptian army is right behind them, they panic. And they say, what are we going to do? And it's in this moment that God decides to show up and intersect and speak directly to Moses. And here's what he says. Exodus 14:16. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. And that's exactly what Moses does. He stretches his arms apart, and sure enough, the Red Sea parts right down the middle. And the Israelites cross over on dry ground. And as the Egyptian army approaches, they see this, and they try to run through also, but soon as they get right in the middle, the walls close in and they're washed away. The Israelites look in complete astonishment and say, God's done it again. But he wasn't even done yet. Because as they walk across the desert, he decides to talk to Moses again, this time on Mount Sinai. And he continues, and this time he goes on to say this. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on the eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations, you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. See, God is telling Moses, I need you to tell them not to forget. I need you to tell them to remember that when they were in their most desperate time, I heard them and I intersected them right when they needed me most. And on eagle's wings, I carried them out of Egypt. And I did things that they could only imagine. But they can't forget. They can't forget that the glorious God who holds the entire world in his hands is still willing to be as close as they need him when they need him the most. And Moses went and told them that, and they were in awe. And God could have left it at that. But he goes on to say something even more in Exodus 25. He says, Exodus 25:8, then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. See, God is saying that not only am I with them, not only do I hear them when they need me the most, am I willing to meet them right where they're at? No. If you build this tabernacle, I'm willing to come down and actually dwell with them, be with them, so that every time they can even wonder and say, is God with us? Does he hear us? They can look at this transportable tabernacle and know he's right here with us. You know, maybe it's time you stop and you look at God in all of his wonder and remember that no matter what you're going through, he's accessible. Because that was the point of the sanctuary. He wanted them to know that he was accessible. Now, of course, they looked at that tabernacle with wonder, kind of like my 4-year-old cousin as he's looking at this egg. Now, if this goes right, it should produce one of the best looking eggs I've ever seen in my life. And we were all ready as we gathered around. And so I take it off the heat. Ouch, it's a little hot. Take it out of the water. Looking good, right? It's a nice looking egg. Untie it here. Now, if this goes like it did the first time, let's just see. Then it'd be a complete letdown. A white egg. This was a failure then, and it's still a failure now. A bust. And I was the worst babysitter ever until I looked at him. And his 4-year-old eyes gazed at this in complete amazement. And he said, "Wow, it's a white one." And I said, "Yeah, it is a white one." You know, it's funny. I looked at this as a failure, but to a 4-year-old, there's really no difference in a colored egg or the miracle of a plain white one. Maybe it's time this week that you started looking at the world through a different perspective, like a 4-year-old would look at this egg. Maybe you need to remember that when things don't go as planned, that you can still find the wonder in what is. Maybe you see someone who's sick and you pray for them to have peace in that time or be healed, and God showed up and helped them in that time. Or maybe you hear the stories of all the people who need clean water who finally get a fresh cup. Or maybe an orphan who needs a mother and finally gets put in a wonderful family. All the stories. And we're not going to say the bad stuff doesn't happen. No, we won't say that at all, because bad stuff is happening all around us. But what if we can change our perspective to see God even in those times? What if you can see things just like the Israelites, and you can realize that there's still a wonderful God who can hear your cries? You know, speaking of the orphan, I had a few friends who had just been married, and I'd imagine that they pictured life in a certain way. But sure enough, things were different. And here they were in the adoption process now. And standing there was a 9-year-old boy with a terrible past, dysfunction, neglect, and abuse. And as I visited them a few weeks later, I saw the mom hugging the boy who was still too scared to speak, but he smiled. And I thought, you know what? Everything's different and nothing went according to plan. But it's beautiful that the mom and the dad and the boy can still see the white egg. Maybe it's time you change your perspective and realize that God is a God that no matter where you are and what you're going through, good or bad, He wants you to know that He's with you, accessible to you at any time, that you are His chosen people, that I am part of His chosen nation. Maybe it's time you change your perspective.